Is it possible that a piece of clothing can keep you warmer and more comfortable in more conditions than everything else on the market? I've been wearing Brynje mesh base layers on almost all of my trips since last fall. Winter camping, multi-day ski traverses, long days ski touring, and days alpine skiing at the resort. That means I can talk about real-world experience with this type of clothing. What it is, how I've been using it, what I like about it, what I'm on the fence about or unsure about, and my final verdict. I have a lot of videos on my channel talking about cold weather gear, clothing, and winter camping. And I often get questions about Brynje mesh base layers, if I've tried them, and what I think about them. Last fall, I reached out to Brynje and they sent me a set of their super thermo polypropylene top and bottoms. So full disclaimer, I didn't pay for this gear, but I did choose the polypropylene because I think it's at a better price point that's more accessible to more people and will probably end up being more durable in the long run. In my experience, all base layers saturate when you're sweating a lot, especially on your back, because there's nowhere for the moisture to go when it's sandwiched between your body and a backpack. Modern synthetics and merino wool definitely dry out faster once they're wet than other options, but anyone who's used classic solid knit Leafa polypropylene style base layers knows how unpleasant they feel once they get soaked. And everyone knows the feeling of taking off a backpack, putting it back on, and having that wet, cold, soaked clothing press up against your body. The theory of mesh base layers is that there's a structure that maintains integrity up against your body. It doesn't absorb moisture, and it creates physical air pockets between your body and your next layer of clothing. That means sweat stays on your body, warms up, and evaporates. It can move through all of your clothing layers as vapor instead of saturating all of your clothing. I've been using the mesh long sleeve top paired with a quarter zip grid fleece. Combination of the mesh base layer and my grid fleece is the foundation of my system. I wear it alone when I'm working really hard, if the temperatures aren't too cold, so think just above or just below freezing, and if there isn't too much wind. If it gets colder out, or if the wind picks up, I add a grid fleece soft shell or a hard shell, or both. For my legs, I've tried the Brynje mesh bottoms paired with my soft shell pants or worn under grid fleece leggings and my soft shell pants. Mesh works, no question. We can debate about what's happening exactly. Is sweat evaporating out of your clothing? Is it wicking out? Who knows? I don't really care. All I know is that I've never been so dry in my life. The first time I used the mesh base layer on a multi-day trip, I got to camp, and when my first layer would normally be completely soaked, it wasn't. It was dry. It was very, very surprising and really exceeded my expectations. It's incredibly versatile. The combination of the mesh base layer with a grid fleece on top is perfect in my mind. It gives you a massive range of temperatures that are comfortable without having to layer up and down as often as with other combinations. When I add my soft shell on top of the mesh base layer and grid fleece, it's definitely warmer than my previous system. You can dump heat fast. When you unzip your outer layers, heat and moisture escapes without any barrier at all. It's a great feeling when you need it. This one's a little bit strange, but the fit is very, very long, especially in the torso. And that means that your first layer doesn't become untucked, which is one of my biggest pet peeves for all clothing, especially when I'm wearing a backpack. It works very well for lower output activities like alpine skiing. I tend to run hot, and I often end up overlayered even when I'm out doing something that's fairly stationary for a lot of the day, like going to the resort and riding a chairlift. So sometimes I'll end up being sweaty on the run and then cooling down a lot on the chair. With the mesh base layer, that's pretty much a non-issue. Well, there's no question that it looks odd. And that's not really a problem. I'm more interested in performance than looks, And if something can keep me warmer and more comfortable outside, I'll use it. But you have to think about the fact that you won't really have this as a layer that you can wear alone. Everyone has also seen the pictures of people wearing Lefa polypropylene outside as a shirt. And that's something that's an option. It might not be ideal, but it's definitely an option. When it comes to a mesh base layer, I just don't think it's a viable option. Obviously, you can take your outer layers off and get changed, but it's just not a practical layer for any extended use. The moment you take off your jacket or anything like that and you're down to just the mesh, you get cold fast. Not only that, is that it doesn't offer any protection. If you had to wear it, you'd get a sunburn, you're not protected from insects, and you definitely wouldn't want to walk anywhere where you could risk getting it caught on branches, sticks, or rocks. So basically, I think that if you're gonna use mesh base layers, especially on shoulder season trips where you can get a temperature swing that warms up quite a bit, you'll probably want to have another layer of clothing with you just in case. I'll probably end up bringing a merino t-shirt, which I can either put on top of the mesh base layer if I want to keep that on, or change out of the mesh base layer completely if it warms up enough. There's one other aspect that I didn't really touch on, and that's my lower body. I haven't really figured out the perfect system to use the mesh base layer for my legs yet. I found that when I wear the mesh base layer alone with my soft shell pants, I end up getting pretty cool when I slow down or get into camp, whereas I'd be comfortable and have always been very comfortable in my grid fleece bottoms alone with my soft shell pants. When I've tried combining the grid fleece bottoms with the mesh base layer and my soft shell pants, it's just too warm. It almost works too well. And that just might be that I wasn't out in conditions that were cold enough. So that's a work in progress. And some of you might have had different experiences or found a system that works for you. In my opinion, Brynje mesh base layers are a win, and they're gonna be part of my cold weather clothing system moving forward. If you're familiar with my channel, it's very, very rare that I 100% endorse a product. Everyone has their own use case, everyone has their own experience, and everyone has their own preferences. But I don't really see what could go wrong with mesh base layers if you try them out, experiment a bit, and find what works for you. I think they can only make your clothing system better. Everyone I know who's tried and uses mesh base layers agrees that they're in the game changer category, which is saying a lot. And the reality is that they aren't really more expensive than anything else on the market, but they just work better. I am curious about the short sleeve t-shirt version of a mesh base layer, and if you can incorporate that into warmer weather or shoulder season trips, maybe under a sun hoodie. I'm really not sure how that would work, but it's something to test out.